Good evening,
Hi, Dr.
Tammy.
Rob.
I'm wearing my turtleneck. It's cold here.
Yes,
Wintertime.
snow. Yes, winter, good rain. We're gonna
Right.
get rid of droughts. It's all good. So,
But I
yes.
didn't move here for cold weather. I
It's
just
temporary.
didn't.
It's temporary.
Folks, I'm really glad to be here. And again, I want to reinforce what Tammy said. If we talk about someone of a certain age or someone who has kids, or we're not talking about you. We like when I write books, the word is confabulate. I might take three different people's stories and put them together and change the ages, but I do try to use those things as an opportunity to educate. And so all I wanted to say is what Tammy and I were talking about earlier, before we started. We have a lot of folks who come in, who are 60 or 55 or 70. We really do have folks. We were talking about being older and why come go to treatment or do this when you're 65 or whatever. And the answer is because you want to be a better person. You don't want to look in the mirror and see the person that you've been seeing. And especially as we're headed toward whatever expiration date we're headed toward, I want to be as clean and clear as I can be with the people I love and with myself. But what we're talking about is, when we work with 20 and 30-year-olds, it's kind of, I guess I feel more of a sense of hope about their future, that they're starting so early and that they're really on this path. Because when I work with people my age, I'm grateful they're getting it. I hope their grandkids or whatever it is really benefit. But I think about, and I don't say this in any way to ask you to validate me, but I've been working on this since I was 28. And Tammy was probably even younger than me.
I
So
was.
the idea for me, with all due respect, that I'd have to start now as opposed to when I was 30, I am so grateful. And I mean no dismiss to all of you who are older, and thank goodness you're joining us on this recovery party. But I wouldn't have the life I had, I wouldn't have the love I have, I wouldn't have the home I have, had I not started this work. And so I'm very grateful for the amount of time that I've been doing it, for myself, for my family. And I invite you at any point in your life to realize that you want to be more loving, you want to be more honest, you want to be a better person, and you want some integrity. So anyway, that's my little, Tammy, we talked
I'm
about
going to
this
tag
earlier.
on to that. Yes. And you talk about the home, and it isn't the structure. You're talking about the relationships, the home, what home is exactly. So be clear. It isn't it isn't the trappings. It's about the connections, and in active addiction, we don't have those connections. We can't. We cannot, we're compartmentalized, we're lying to ourselves and everyone else. But like Dr. Rob, I want to affirm, it's never too late to start. Sooner is better. There's going to be more negative consequences. And it's just, I talk to lots of people, as you do. And I talk to so many betrayed partners who are just worn out, from all of this, and addicts too. But the partners are just, beyond the pale with it. And so, getting into recovery and really doing the work, not just crossing off a few boxes. I hear that often too, where it's like, I'm going to see my therapist and, I'm doing one 12-step meeting a week. That isn't going to cut what's, hang on, by the time you're 60, decades of stuff for 2 hours a week. Give me a break. Sorry. Go now, please.
Well, no, I wanted to validate something you said, which is we offer a whole bunch of courses. And that isn't, it's great that you go. You'll learn a lot. It's stuff you won't get in therapy. I think the work is incredibly educational, will push you forward. But that's not it. Like I see people say, well, I am, and especially with their spouses, well, I'm going to this group. Well, great. That's kind of like reading a book, only having Audible, except maybe there are other people around to give you some feedback. You still have to do what you need to do to get well, and that's a much more active process. So Lord knows, I certainly recommend the work we do and going online and learning, and there's lots of courses. But that isn't the end point. That's just part of the beginning. Yeah. So Tammy, do you want to get started
I
with
have one more
questions?
thing and then we're going to get started on that, because I
Sure.
tell people all the time, they'll call and they'll ask about residential treatment. We have an amazing expert clinical team that provides treatment for men only in this arena: sex addiction, porn addiction, intimacy disorder, or some have co-occurring, chemical addiction. That is 14, 21, or 28-day length of stay with expert clinic. Dr. Rob is working directly with clients, Dr. David Fawcett, 3 master's level professionals. And I get people that call about that, and then they sign up for a work group. Like, completely different. That is a 6-week, once a week course versus intensive, intentional treatment. Great if you sign up for a work group and that works for you, fantastic, along with lots of other things. But you can't do a work group that costs less than $400 and have the same expectations that you do for treatment. So just clarifying that it's everybody's journey. Everybody gets to pick. But for you betrayed partners, man, for addicts too. I'm always sad when an addict doesn't choose to get help. They're hanging on to stuff that doesn't really matter, and missing out on home and all of those meaningful things, in our lives. But for betrayed partners, that are just worn out by hanging in there and trying, having the addict get the help that they really need, is life-changing for you as well as them.
Well, now I have to add one more thing, which is I want to speak to the young fathers, the ones who, and there's some of you here, there's 34 people. I want to talk to the men who have 2-year-olds, 5-year-olds, 9-year-olds, 11-year-olds. From almost every man I work with, he does not understand the degree to which something that these kids never see and don't know about, how deeply that affects them. That if you are not fully supporting your spouse, male or female, then you're not being good. You're not being good to your kids. You may do their homework, you may play with them, spend time with them, but if the mother of your children or the father of your children is not being supported and nurtured, that's stress on them. If kids are watching parents who are, holding on to tension and not talking about it or whatever, the dad's on the phone and they feel all of that. Kids don't miss anything. When Tammy and I were young, kids were like, I don't know, we weren't even sentient beings. We're like a little puppy. Oh, that's just a kid. It won't matter to them. But we realize now that it absolutely does. And so I want to say to you younger fathers, please understand that it'll be a heartbeat before your kids are older and you can no longer help them. I say to the men who are 60, it's a little harder on you because there's nothing you can do to go back and fix the damage you've caused. You can save for therapy, but give your kids, or you can be a better grandparent. But how many of the men who are older I work with who say, I wish that I had started sooner because I would have been a better father and their mother would have been a happier mom. And so I want to say that to all the parents here. And I'll say one more thing. Every time I see a couple, when I do these consultations, and I do 2-hour consultations online, generally to frame the problem, push people toward the problem, all of that stuff. I inevitably hear that the person who's been doing the acting out thinks they do, but doesn't really have a clue how much the people in their life has been affected, because they think, well, if nobody knew, and they just thought I was at work, but kids feel everything. And so please, while you have the chance, if you can make a difference in their lives, do this, come to treatment, take your course, get to work. Okay. I do tell them, Tammy, by the way, that the reason I'm talking to them, this couples that I do, is not for them. I almost always say it's for their children, because I truly believe that's where we make the difference, is in how these people parent and love their children, for those who haven't. But anyway, yes, let's
So
get to
you
work.
also do those for individuals. So those not in a relationship, you've helped a lot of people who, on expert consultations, who are individuals as well. So it isn't just couples, but for those in a relationship, yes, it is the couple. So,
Well, in legal issues, I'll just say I've been in
Oh,
court
yeah.
a lot
Yeah.
for those kinds of things. Anyway, thank you for letting us chat.
Okay.
Tammy, you
So
go.
the first question, my SA husband's 1-year sobriety date is today. It's also my 1-year discovery date. He is doing everything possible in recovery and doing it well. Can you elaborate on where couples are generally at the 1-year mark?
Now that's an interesting question. I have not heard that before, and I wish I had an answer for you, because let me say this: I don't know what this person means by. Let me put my glasses back on. what to expect, or what, do they mean in terms of intimacy? Do they mean in terms of communicate, like, or do they mean they're finally living together? In other words, can you frame this question, Tammy, in a way that you think it would be most effective, or what are your thoughts?
Well, I think it's interesting that discovery was also the sobriety date. Honestly, that's pretty rare, that somebody, is able to stop the problematic behavior. I think, you say he's doing well. I guess I'm also wondering how you are doing, because this was a year ago for you. And typically partners are behind because he's known all the time. And I use he and she. This is pronouns only for ease of conversation. So we know anybody can be an addict and all kinds of relations. So I'm just using he for addict and she for pronoun for spouses or betrayed partners, just for clarity. Okay. All right. So, but he has known all along that he was acting out, had this secret life, doing all of these things, and you didn't. And so my question is, what support have you had? Because you're seeing he's doing well, and he's apparently doing things. That's action. That's great. Because we say all the time, lips moving, lying. Actions, really are, how things start to shift and change. So I guess my question for you is, where are you, not as a couple, where are you as a betrayed partner? Have you had the support? Have you done formal therapeutic disclosure? Where are you? There's so many different paths, and it really kind of depends. Obviously, hopefully you both have, a professional person helping support it. He's doing all of the S groups, 12-step, our drop-in groups, the sex addiction 101 work group, whatever. And then continuing, we've got inner child and out of the doghouse and all of those as well. But for you, have you had support? Because if you just had discovery, that's trauma. And so then what have you had to help you heal, regardless of what he's doing, so that you've had the support for your betrayal trauma? Does that make sense?
I agree that the partner who's asking also needs to look inside and say, where am I? Especially, and I'm not saying that this isn't a good question. I thought of an answer, which is, if you're both doing your work and you're growing, I think around a year is when you start to run into the real relationship. When you start to move past the drama and the issues of addiction, and then you start looking at yourselves and saying, well, who are we without all that? And what are our issues? Because a lot of you folks go to couples therapy often because there's problems, but nobody knows what's really going on because people are lying. And so once you finally are at this point, this might be a good time to say, let's look at the two of us as a couple, in our relationship, what's working, what isn't. If hopefully the lies are gone and the hiding is gone, and then you have a solid foundation to begin to figure out how to move forward together. And so, whereas when you're in active addiction, it's all blurry and you can't really see. So where I think you are is at a place where you can really begin to look at each other and step toward the connection that we have, rather than the addiction being a distraction, an immediate distraction, I guess. We should keep moving, Tam, unless you have
Yes.
more.
No, married 36 years, in-house separated for almost 2 years. My husband is finally in recovery for about 6 months. I am so used to being alone, sleeping alone, doing my own thing, that it's hard to consider welcoming back into my life. I feel like it's time, but I'm struggling to figure that out. This makes sense. And it's one of those where, when I hear people that have been separated for a longer period of time, yeah, you kind of get doing your own thing. And it is disruptive in some manner. So what are your thoughts on this?
Well, I see finally in recovery for 6 months. And so I see a process that has just begun. I wouldn't probably be thinking, okay, everything's great and we're ready to move on. 6 months is not a lot of time. But what I wonder about is do you guys date? Like, if you're intending to move forward, it doesn't have to be, well, now we're together and now things are where they were, sexually or whatever you had thought they were. Why don't you get to know each other again? You don't have to have sex. You don't have to be sleeping in the same bed. You can have I don't remember what the movie was, but I will think of it, with Spencer Tracy and Katharine Hepburn, but it might have been Doris Day. Anyway, I'm dating myself.
It
But
doesn't matter.
you
Yeah,
can't draw a line, even if you have a line across the middle of the house and neither one of you crosses it. that's an even better way to go out and start to rediscover who are we together, what's like, what do we enjoy, and then separating, because I think that's more like the reality of your life. So the first part would be complete separation, and then it would not be going back to where we were. It'd be trying pieces out and talking about it. Gee, I like this part. Almost like going back to the beginning, where you're rediscovering each other without this big thing in the room that nobody knew about. So I think, rather than thinking, oh my God, welcoming back into my arms and my home, and it's going to take all this time, and could you take a couple of evenings and go do something fun, or Saturday, and worry less about the end point and think more about where you are now? That would be my feedback.
Yeah, well, and in-house separation is challenging in and of itself. So you've managed to navigate that for 2 years, and so it's it's inherently awkward. And so I can imagine, coming back together in a different way is awkward as well. So one of the things I'm thinking is, like Dr. Rob said, dating and all of that, but remembering that you are different people, like than you were 36 years ago. It's one of those where, he's now in recovery. So what does that really look like? Learning more about each other, is going to be helpful. So, okay, I'm going to read the next question. Then somebody's trying to get into a work group, so I'll but I'm going to read this first. Hi, Dr. Rob and Tammy. I have a question regarding attention to detail and any tips you may have to avoid a lack of it. I've always been someone that goes from A to E without hitting B, C, and D, and then always gets me in trouble in both my personal and professional life. I have been diagnosed with slight ADHD, but I don't want to excuse my actions on that. This weekend, I withdrew money from an ATM and put it in a slush fund we keep for emergencies. In the past, I've done this to buy porn video, and of course, didn't tell my wife I took the money out. Whenever we take money out for this fund, we always let each other know. This time I took the money out, left the receipt on the shredder, and didn't think twice about it and moved on. My wife understandably was upset about it and wanted an explanation for my doing it. In my head, I was doing the right thing, but did not remember to tell her about it, and it became an issue, as it needs to become muscle memory like everything else as a person does, and realizing a person, oops, there's more, apparently. Hang on. Hang on. It's been 13 months. My wife still doesn't know if she wants to try and rebuild. Today, an email from my family came out regarding a family reunion. I made a joke on the email with my sister. My wife was very upset and said I wasn't grieving the relationship or hurting because I am able to joke. I'm in therapy, multiple groups.
I think these are two different questions.
You
really
do? So
yeah. So why don't you go do what you need to do? Although
okay.
I do want to understand why we're having problems with people signing up, but that's a whole other different issue.
Yeah, they just don't pay attention to the Zoom link, but that's I'm gonna mute and take care of this. I know. I'm gonna take care of it. I'll be right back. So you start with the first one.
So when you lie, you set everything back to the beginning. It's like a reset button. You may say to yourself, oh, well, it was just money. And your spouse thinks, well, if they're still lying about stuff like that, what else are they lying about? So every time you minimize, you lie, you think you're helping yourself or whatever it is you think, but you're actually undermining, you're really bringing your spouse back to the beginning. I mean, I had a couple who I thought was doing really great. I mean, this is really a true story. And he lied about taking out the garbage a few times. He lied about not bringing groceries, whatever he lied about. And she left him because she said, you know what, if you're going to lie about little things, I can only imagine how much you're going to lie if you actually have to tell me something difficult. So yeah, I guess what's difficult to me about this question is you're acting out. Like, if I start fantasizing about the sex worker and then I find one online and then I take some money out of the bank, granted, it's really good that I didn't go and that I went home but you're already on the way to acting out. So that is actually more my concern. You're worried about something with your spouse, and I'm worried about, how did you handle this with your recovery? And do you see this as, because it's the way this reads, Tammy, is sort of like, well, this kind of happened and I kind of ended up doing this. And there isn't a lot of ownership here for what this person did. And then without your ownership, it's easy to not understand, when is your wife going to get over this or figure it out? So I'd be looking at less at trying to explain things to her and make her feel better, and more at, where am I in recovery? And what I would say to her is, you know what, this is a real warning sign, and I get it. And I'm going to take this to a higher level. I'm going to, do more therapy. I'm going to go to more meetings. I'm going to do whatever it takes. But please leave your spouse alone and let them feel whatever it is they need to feel, because not only were you 20 minutes late, it's not like just your average, you actually went on the path of what you did before. I can only imagine that she has figured out before that money is missing or whatever. And here she is again in the same situation as she was before. Why would she believe anything you say? So, yeah, I think you should take this much more seriously in terms of your own recovery and leave your wife alone. That would be my feedback. Tammy?
Well, yeah, I was like, okay, so you're standing at the ATM. Like I can even imagine kind of the bubble that you're kind of in a
Right.
zone and you're dissociated and you say, I go from A to E without, so first of all, why are you taking the money out? If we take out money, why doesn't your wife take the money out and put it
Right.
in the slush fund? So you don't even have to do that. If you're at the ATM, let's you back it up. Let's say you're at the ATM. I'm at the ATM. I'm taking money out for the slush fund. Okay? Question mark. Wait for answer before taking money out.
Right.
Get approval. And then I love the part, because I'm an addict, I love the part where in my head, of course, in my head, I was doing the right thing. I told myself that a million times. I made up all the excuses for why it was okay. So we lie to ourselves first. That's the very first lies we tell is to ourselves. So yeah, to me, this is like, making an amends, not saying I'm sorry, making an amends and changing the structure of, it's not, we tell each other after the fact, if we're taking the money out, it's like, you need a new plan, because this one clearly, had, it needs some tweaks to it in order to be successful. So there's some opportunity there to make a different plan. But it's the bigger issue, like Dr. Rob was saying, this is one piece, and if you were really doing great with, everything else, your wife, wouldn't have to feel so distrusting, and interesting that you left the receipt on the shredder. Why was it on the shredder? Like, why wasn't it here, honey? I want you to know I did this, not on the shredder that's going to get shredded, so she still won't know. More to more. So anyway.
Well, there's one more thing in here that I really want to challenge, which is your last sentence. It will never be muscle memory ever for me to not want to go to the ATM. No matter how many times I practice not doing it or don't do it, there's always going to, my addict, when I'm doing well, the addict is my addict is in the corner doing push-ups. So if you expect that it's just going to become automatic, that you won't do this anymore, you won't want to do this anymore, it isn't like muscle memory. Our addict doesn't really remember much. And so we need that other part of us that is constantly putting, what's missing here, as Tammy said, is pieces in place between you and the money. Personally, I don't know why you even have an ATM card. You could just say to your wife, if I need money, I'll ask you. Just a thought. What are you putting in between you and the bank machine? For me, it would be, I'm not allowed to take money in the bank unless I call my sponsor and get through to them. And then I have to tell them why. And if they agree that I can take money out, so put a process in between you and this, because it will never be muscle memory. But what you can learn is that the right thing to do is reach out to someone. That we can learn, but we'll forget it in a heartbeat. We have to practice recovery. We're never cured. We're never done. It's never automatic. I would always prefer to act out, to be honest with you, but experience and hard work says to me that that's only going to lead me to pain. And that's not about muscle memory. That's about having worked on it for so long and still working on it. I think Tammy and I still go to meetings. I still, after 30 years, I want to be reminded of how bad it could be. And I want to put my arms around that person who is struggling and saying it's going to get better. I love being in that place. And that's part of why we take it on as life's work. We're not addicted, by the way, to 12-step programs. We just get so much for ourselves, and part of that in the giving at this point. So anyway, I don't see the muscle memory part. I don't think that's the best way to look at it. I would have concrete things that are in the way of what you do.
And
Now,
A, B, C, D, E, not A to E.
right, exactly. And you can put that on a chart, by the way.
Mhm.
We have sometimes say box A, box B, what are the steps I'm going to take? And what if I don't do this one? Then what do I do? And you can make a whole chart out of it. Now read this one, Tammy.
Okay. It's been 13 months. My wife doesn't know still if she wants to try and rebuild. Today, an email from my family came out regarding a family reunion, and I made a joke on the email with my sister. My wife was very upset and said I wasn't grieving the relationship or hurting because I'm able to joke. I'm in therapy in multiple groups as well and doing the work. I'm learning and improving as days go by, but everything that happens like this makes her say she is done. I don't know how to deal with this. I'm not grieving the same way she is, but I'm grieving. How do I make her see that? So we have a couples healing from betrayal work group that's starting next month, and it's grieving losses together. I would really encourage you. It's on the Seeking Integrity site. We only offer it a couple times a year, but that could be a really useful thing for the two of you, and grieving losses, like, I forgot the language because it's really old language from the big book, but it's we are not a glum lot is what I think it is. It's something like that. We learn, my counselor in treatment said, if you don't make recovery fun, you're not going to make it. So yes, but here's the deal. Like what I said earlier, you knew all along that you were cheating, lying, and doing all of those things. Your wife gets hit with discovery 13 months ago, and so she's in a very different place. So honoring that she's in a different place, and and learning language of empathy. Dr. Eddie Caparucci has done some including some role plays on how to show up differently. I'm sorry that my past behavior has been so hurtful for you. I mean, there's some specific language. It doesn't minimize, it's not placating, it's being showing up and being real. But we also don't like we also have to have humor, as long as it's appropriate. I am assuming with your sister it was, so but she gets to have her hurt, I mean, that's
Right.
really where she's at. So Dr. Rob?
I couldn't agree more, Tammy. I think, well, first of all, I think it bothers me that you make any kind of comparison between your grieving and your partner's. You got to do, no offense, you got to do whatever you wanted to do for years and years and years. And if you're grieving anything, it's no longer being able to get away with lies, no longer being able to act out. And there's probably some grief about how you hurt your relationship and hurt your partner. But that's like 10 pounds against a 2-ton weight that your spouse is dealing with, in terms of they feel unsafe in the world. They feel unsafe in their home. They're scared of what the next thing. And I do think you lack empathy and compassion for what she is going through. And I would expect that I don't know when my partner's going to get triggered. Just because I didn't intend this and that. Well, maybe there were other conversations I was having, and I was joking with other women. It reminded her, you can't predict. She's still very angry. She's still very vigilant. She's still it's on the surface. And 13 months is not that long. I would just suggest to you, and read Out of the Doghouse, a relationship saving guide for men caught cheating. You're the one I wrote it for. I'm not grieving the same way as she is. How can I help her understand what I'm doing? I don't think it's quite about that, but I really wrote a book. And by the way, if I sell a book, I make about 12 cents, just so you know. So I'm not trying to push this so I can have more mortgage money or something, but I believe in what I write. And I wrote a book for men who cheat on a woman because we are clueless. I didn't write by the way, a book for women who cheat on men. This is a population I wanted to write about, because men do not understand the healing, the work that it takes to bring peace to a heterosexual marriage. We just don't. And to me, and by the way, when I wrote Out of the Doghouse, I didn't write a namby-pamby, self-help book. I said, dude, this is where you're at. This is what you're doing. If you want to be in this relationship, you better go do that. It's very clear that it doesn't come from a woman. No offense, ladies, but it's very direct. And I think there are things, you're right. You have stuff you need to learn. And if you want to learn, take a course, read a book, talk to other men who are dealing with these kinds of things, go to a drop-in group and talk to the guys about struggling with your relationship. But I do think there's a little too much emphasis on I'm in therapy, I'm going to multiple groups, and I'm doing the work. And therefore, why is she so upset? It doesn't matter how much you do. This is her pain. This is her struggle. This is what she's going through. And I suggest, rather than saying, and I bet you do, but it was just my sister and I was just making a joke, or that's why I wrote Out of the Doghouse.
Mm-hmm.
Because the right thing to say is, I was just talking to my sister, but I can completely understand how you would get triggered by stuff like this. And I caused this, and I'm so, so sorry. And I'm really sensitive to the fact that you have every right to be triggered when you see me joking with someone on the phone. And give it to them. We have to fall on our sword over and over and over again. And if that's not where you are, defending, asking for forgiveness, apologizing, telling that your spouse how troubled you've been and how much trauma you have and how now you're working, leave them alone. Let them have their feelings and don't question their feelings. Step in and tell them you understand because you caused them. Okay.
Okay. Next question. So it says, my husband is the sex addict. He has told me not to call him a sex addict. He says he has only anger and resentment towards me. No other person makes him mad. Our couple CSAT knows my husband is not in recovery and tells me I'm not in program. I have an amazing sponsor, make calls, pray, meditate, and read, but I mess up. This is so hard. My question is, am I wasting my time with couples therapy? Can we progress if he refuses program? And why is the CSAT not being honest with me? Oh, this is a
Well,
loaded one.
to your last point, I don't know your therapist. I don't know what's going on in your therapy. And I know as a therapist that people often have opinions and beliefs about what we should be doing, what we shouldn't be doing. Sometimes there are things that I think about that I think this isn't the right time to bring it up, or this isn't the right situation. So I don't know anything about what's going on in your relationship. I know this though, a couple of things. Couples therapy is not helpful in a situation like this. There are so many lies. You're being victimized in this situation. I'm the one who cheated on you for the last 12 years, and I had sex with 300 people, and I've been seeing sex workers, and I'm looking at porn all the time, and I'm having affairs, but I'm angry at you because you call me on it. I mean, how entitled is that? And honestly, if I was you and someone said this to me, that no one else makes them mad, I would say, you see the door over there? Let me open it for you so you can get out. This is, how dare, excuse me for getting dramatic, how dare this person push you back and make you on the defensive when you've had to live with this, understand it, and now you are. So what I hear is that you're getting a lot of pushback about being exactly where you should be. And by the way, of course, this is so hard. We do get overwhelmed. We do yell and scream when we don't mean to. This is one of the biggest challenges you'll ever go through in your life. So please don't talk about messing up. Say I have been really doing the best I can and I feel good about my progress. And by the way, I wrote another book about this called Prodependence, which is not a codependency model. It's helping not therapists, people understand their role in being involved with an addict. And I will say to all of you, what this is about, I don't think there's anything wrong with any of you for staying with us. I think we are blessed that you do. And the reason that you stay with us is despite all the crap we've caused, you still love us. And I don't think you stay with us out of your own illness. I think you stay with us because you love us and you still see, I hear this, Tammy, and I still see the part of you that I saw all along that I believe in. I just want all this addiction and abuse stuff to get out of the way so we can have that part. So Tammy, you're
A lot. So the Prodependence, moving beyond the myth of codependency. So please read this. I'm disheartened when I read, but I mess up. This is so hard. So you're doing all of this work, and the addict who's causing all of this is blaming you, which and Dr. Rob says this all the time, there's nothing you did or didn't do that caused him to act out. There's nothing you are doing now that could. So if the therapist is, let's see, where was it? Our couples CSAT knows my husband is not, and tells me I am not in program. You aren't the addict, unless you are the addict, but I don't hear that. So you are the betrayed partner. You deserve support. The coupleship is the client in a couples therapy. That's just it. He's not your addict husband isn't, you are not. So the relationship is, but as Dr. Rob has said, experience has told us, that for years that couples therapy too early in the process when there's active addiction like this is not
Right.
only not helpful, but often
It's
harmful.
counterproductive.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, somebody used an analogy, and I've used this a bunch. I wish I could give credit where credit is due, but it's like rowing a boat with one oar. You're there, you're paddling like crazy, and you're going around in circles because your addict husband is just sitting there going like, yep, it's her, it's her, it's her. And so it doesn't really help anything, to do that. So I would encourage you to get your own healthy support, get your own personal therapist. If you need help, Tammy, TAMI at Seeking Integrity, and tell me where you're located, and I'll help you find a pro-dependent aligned support person. We have a work group for betrayed partners. Part of that is healthy boundaries, your physical safety, your emotional safety, your financial safety, your spiritual safety. I value me. What do I need to do to take care of me, regardless of what you choose to do or not do? But I just told somebody, this is only Monday, so it was today. you know, nobody can make me mad. I can get mad at what they're doing, but nobody can make me mad. I choose my actions and reactions, sometimes better than others. But to blame somebody else for how I'm acting, that I'm mad at you. Well, I can, Dr. Rob, what you're doing right now is really hurtful to me, and here's why. But
Right.
you're making me mad is like a little kid having a tantrum, quite frankly. And it's blame shifting. You've got enough on your plate with the betrayal trauma that you have experienced. This is his issue. We have a treatment program, 14, 21, or 28 days, and you guys would be an ideal couple for the two of you to have an expert consultation with Dr. Rob. Just saying. But whatever you need to do to take care of you, healthy boundaries for you, because you are living with an active addict, and it's a chronic condition. It will continue to get worse until and unless he gets help to be better. But you can still take care of you, and you can stay in the relationship. It's just with healthy boundaries so that you're safe. So
I wanted to add one thing to that. And by the way, the sun is setting, and so I feel like it's just like weird in here. So I wanted to say something about the last sentence you mentioned was, why is the CSAT not being honest with you? So with all due respect, you're not being honest with the CSAT. You need to say, I don't feel like you understand, and he's not in recovery, and I am doing the best I can, and I don't understand why you're not confronting him. I don't understand why you think I'm part of the problem. I don't understand, is this part of your process, or I don't feel comfortable. I feel like I'm being the bad guy. The best gift you can give us therapists is to let us know what's going on. We are not, believe it or not, teachers who are going to say, do this, do that, do this, do that, and who can't be questioned. We want, from your questions, we learn. From your decisions, we learn. And by the way, if your decision was, I don't want to be in couples therapy until my husband is in recovery, because I with all due respect, I think he should keep going, whatever, but I'm going to take my time to talk to my sponsor and go to my meetings and take care of myself. If you have a good therapist, they will respect that. They will look at the situation, and they will be curious. And Lord knows, Tammy, whose client we just kicked out of their therapy, but nonetheless, I'm more interested in you guys than I am the therapists. You can help us learn, and you can help us direct you better. And you can say, I don't think this is the time for me to be here. And our job is to respect, to learn, and to give feedback as best we can. So you need to say more to the professional. You're there. I think you should do it.
yeah, and my concern is this, and you didn't say it, but this feels like there's codependent, that you need to be working on you rather than, gosh, I can see how hard you're working, to support this relationship, which is, again, from a prodependent lens. So, okay. So the next question, your comment about being full-time parent is right on point. I am taking it to heart 50 years later, working on being an awesome grandparent. How do I apologize to kids for my bad fathering? It hurts my heart to see how I've neglected him.
Well, I'm glad you're an awesome grandparent, and I think you are helping your child. Because I hear this when I'm running treatment, which is, my children have noticed and said to me, wow, you really are interacting in a much more compassionate or engaged way with my kids. Thank you. And so I do think they notice. I'm not saying this is the answer, but I think if they will notice the changes in you in terms of your relationship with their children, and that will make them feel better. But to your point, I want to speak personally, which is one of the greatest gifts that I could have been given by my parents, and I really mean this, is if at any point ever before they passed, they had said in any way, you know, we don't think we did the best job, or there were things we didn't do right, or had there been any acknowledgement that it wasn't just about me, that the problem wasn't mine, that would have been an incredible gift to me. And they didn't have to do anything about it. They didn't have to pay for my therapy, just to acknowledge, gee, it didn't go as well as it might have. So to me, I think to say to your kids, I've been thinking, I've been growing, and I just want you to know, I think I could have been a better dad. And I'm so sorry that I didn't spend more time or more for whatever, and leave it there. And even if you just say that, what you're telling them is your beliefs, your experience is valid. You didn't make that up. I wasn't as available. Because kids will blame themselves, or kids will, you know, idealize a parent, or, but to go to them and say, I know something wasn't right, it probably didn't feel right to you, and this is why. That's the most incredible gift you can give them. Don't necessarily tell them what it was, but in fact, I would prefer that you don't tell them what that was, but that you were distracted, that you weren't the best parent, that you wish you'd done this or that, and leave an opening for there. And most often they're going to rush in and say, oh no, Dad, that you were fine, because that's what kids do. But I think, again, you go back and say, I'm so glad you feel that way, but in me, in my looking back on your parenting, I could have done a better job. And that will mean everything to them. Tammy, if you don't,
Well
go ahead.
said. Okay.
Thank you.
Can you please define recovery is the next question.
Ooh, I want you to start. That's when I want you
Okay.
to start.
I do love this question because like I really have very clear delineation about it. Abstinence is first. Just stopping the problematic behavior is abstinence. That's not recovery. I get people all the time that I've been in recovery for 5 weeks. No, you've been abstinent for 5 weeks. You stop the problematic behavior. Then I kind of look at the next phase is sobriety. It's like you're starting to put the puzzle pieces together. Recovery is a process. It's showing up differently. It's like Dr. Rob was just talking about with that last question. You start showing up differently. And it isn't just about the not acting out piece. It's about I'm living differently. I'm showing up, you know, in my home life differently. I'm showing up with integrity to relationships. I do what I say I'm going to do. And otherwise I take care of it. Like the earlier ATM one, that to me isn't recovery. That's like I'm still in the middle and on a slippery slope. So what I find is it really does take, 18 months to 2 years to if you're doing the stuff. It doesn't just magically happen like, oh, flip a switch, at a certain time period. But I really do find this for myself. Like I know the 12 steps, and if I stop at any given moment, I can tell you what step I'm working on right in that moment. But they're so ingrained in me that I live them now. So it's a very different process than having to think about every single, aspect of it. But it's so worth it to be congruent, to not be compartmentalized, not lie to myself, not blame shift, to have the ability to clean up a mess. If I need to make amends, I make amends. I don't like making amends, so I would do my darndest to live so I don't have to. But if I have to, I will, if I need to, because it's a need on my part. So that's my shortest version. But I really do see it as, because people think as soon as they stop acting out, they're in recovery. And I go, yep, no, that's abstinence.
I'm writing a whole list. So I'll tell you what I wrote so far. I started with what Tammy said. You stop the behavior. You have understood that your healing is a primary life goal forever, that you can't let go of that you're doing something every single day toward change. And I'm not going to go into what they are. We talk about them forever. You're fully honest with yourself and others. And if you're not, you go back and clean it up. You clean up your shit. You are honest and you have integrity. You're one person. That's the outcome. You have people that you can turn to when you're in trouble, and those relationships are ongoing, not something you just reach out to when you're in a crisis. I could write a million more things, but what I'm really talking about is the belief and understanding that we are deeply flawed, as are all human beings. But for us, for our kind of flaws, require a daily recommitment to understanding what we need to do to be sane. Because we're not sane, we're crazy people. And our remission is, is dependent on the relationships we have to support us in healing. Whether that's therapy or groups, or, it's all about, in some ways, not trying to do it yourself. So yeah, I mean, there are books about this. What is recovery? How do you define recovery? Everyone will have a different answer, but there's a reason we named our residential program Seeking Integrity, because integrity comes from the word disintegration. And so that's how we live as addicts. We're in different parts. There's the lying part, the cheating part, the looking good part, the whatever it is. And integrity is about no one would be surprised no one would be surprised at what I do, where I've been. I have no secrets. Granted, I don't want you to see me in the shower, but if I said to you, I took a shower this morning, it wouldn't be like, oh my God, how could you? I don't want anything to be a surprise. I don't want to have to hide anything. And that's when I can begin to come me, by the way. So I could answer this. We need to write a book together, Tammy, to answer this question.
I would love that. It's just been recorded. I would actually participate in that book writing, and I know what an ordeal book writing is. So, oops.
Well, that's okay.
You shouldn't have said that.
I'll support you in your journey. Oh, by the way,
okay.
there is there are 4, I think a series of 4. Can you mention the stuff you did with Charlie? Because I think that also points you.
Yes, those were on the 12 steps, and she did a great job. So we're talking about our mutual lovely friend, Charlie Rizian. I'm going to put a link in the chat in just a moment. After I read the next question, I'll go find that link. But she did a series of videos on the 12 steps, and she took apart, I've been in recovery a long time. She took apart word by word, and I was like, oh, I hadn't thought of it that way. So she did a fantastic job of breaking down every single word in the 12 steps. And so I think it's a really good way to look at things and could be very helpful. So I will pull those videos and put it in the chat, but you can email me if you're watching this later, Tammy, TAMI at Seeking Integrity. It is on our website, but I know where they are, and I'll go find them. So, okay, next question.
And that's free.
Yes.
No, let's go.
Okay. Does sex addiction affect my memory to my partner? She claims to have brought something up a bunch of times, and it surprises me, or I am skeptical of the number of times she claims she has brought it up, like she's exaggerating the number. She feels disrespected by it. I know what I tell her, other than it has never been an issue at any other time in my life with other people, work, etc. So I don't know what to think.
You want to start, Tim? I have some thoughts, but
well, I was thinking, like, how often, when people are doing their timeline or doing some work in the treatment program, how they can't remember stuff. And we even talk, I get lots of calls on Dr. Rob's peer case consultation group. So he has a group for just professionals. The number one topic is formal therapeutic disclosure. That's why it's not a do-it-yourself thing. The reason I bring this up is there has to be a plan for things that are forgotten as part of that. If you think about in addiction, things are very compartmentalized, and there is a disconnect. It doesn't give us an excuse. But I was also thinking, Dr. Rob, how you talk about, my wife has said that to me 1,000 times, and like I never heard it. So there is a disconnect, and I can understand, that you perform really well at work. That's a different environment, but in a vulnerable relationship, so it could be real. I think honoring that she's saying that, understanding that she, doing a better job of, you see Dr. Rob writing things down all the time. I've got notes all the time too. So sometimes it's like, I need to make a note of that. I need to put that on my calendar, whatever it is, if that would help intervene. Finding practical solutions for some of those things can help,
And again, this is just this story. This particular question is why I wrote Out of the Doghouse, because you don't understand the bigger picture. you're really in the weeds with, well, that was exaggerated. And I thought she told me, but she didn't tell me this. And who cares? There's a bigger picture that she's, sometimes when I want to express my anger, I'll say, I've told you, I've said this 100 times. Well, maybe it was 45. But the bigger point is, I am so frustrated because I have brought this up with you and you were not listening. So I would be less focused on, well, I'm not sure it was really this. And it might have been, when I do my couples consults, one of the things that I say to the couple is that the detail doesn't matter. In other words, if this happened when you were on vacation 3 years ago, and that's what one of you thinks, but the other kind of remembers that it was 4 years ago when it was the holidays, it doesn't matter. The detail doesn't matter. What matters is, why is she exaggerating things? Why? Because she doesn't feel heard. And she feels like you don't get the degree of difficulty that she's been through. So I would suggest, and by the way, something else here, I don't know what to tell her, except this has never been an issue. Leave her alone. Let her think what she thinks, and don't, again, out of the doghouse, don't defend, don't make apologies, don't try to get understanding. I can understand why you would think that's an issue. It isn't and hasn't been, but hey, I've been lying for years, so what do I know? In other words, stop. It's best to not try to be critical or curious about or intervene on their anger. Just let them have it. I don't know whether you brought it 100 times or 3 times, but I wasn't listening, and that's what matters to them. So stop picking on the things, in my opinion, that start listening to her more. She feels disrespected. What are you doing that leaves her feeling disrespected? And I think what you're doing is you're in the weeds and you're not seeing the larger picture. A lot of you guys, it's interesting. There's a lot of doghouse questions in here tonight. There's a lot of, I think I'm doing the best I can to heal what's going on with my partner, but apparently I'm not getting it. And I get that. We don't understand, and we underestimate, and we miscalculate the degree to which our partners are angry and disappointed. And by the way, I want to say to all the couples that when I hear from you and I'm working directly with you, especially you spouses, when I ask you, what has your experience been like in this relationship? What has been difficult for you or the most difficult for you? Can you tell me your story, if you will? It's interesting because even though they're sitting with me or they're in our program or whatever, 80% of what the spouses say has nothing to do with sex. 80%. What they're talking about is, you were lying all the time. You were distant. You were unavailable. You weren't there for me. You weren't, you were out. It's about the intimacy and the relationship, the connection, the seeing and hearing each other, the abuse that never gets addressed. These are the things that really upset the spouses. Yeah, you had sex with a bunch of people, and I'm furious about that. And I'll say to you spouses, but you all know that that's the tip of the iceberg, that your real pain, that's the concrete thing you can point at and say, you hurt me, look at this. But if any of you spouses really question yourself, you understand, I hope, that you're hurt about years and years of being in a relationship by yourself. And all of us addicts who think, oh no, I was engaged, and you think you are, but trust me, your spouses know better and they're right. Both of us have been in situations where we were absolutely convinced that we were available, and then years later people say, you were kind of a mess. You're not in a position to say how you're doing. It's really your spouse's experience and what they're going through. So anyway, moving on.
Well, I just want a quick tag onto that one, then I'll read the next question. But people talk about, well, I was at my kid's, softball game, but if you're thinking about acting out, you're thinking about swiping, or you're swiping, your phone or whatever you're doing. If you're physically there but mentally vacant, you're not there. That's just the reality of things. So oh, I wanted to tag on one more thing too with because you said, we're crazy, and we are, but here's the deal. Like the person that, but there's help and hope, that's the difference. And the person that said, my husband won't let me call him a sex addict. I was like, thank goodness for a label of an addict, because that told me there's something, and I'm not just crazy, there's something. And if I do these things, I don't have to live in that crazy and chaos. I can do things differently. So to me, that label was incredibly freeing, not a label of shame. It's like, okay, great, there's hope. So, it's always interesting when somebody says, don't call me that, or I don't like the label of addict. And I'm like, well, and I'm sorry, but that is a part of who I'm not just an addict, but that is it. Like you said, if I don't on a daily basis take ownership of, I need to take care of myself, then, it's just waiting, doing push-ups. So, but we don't have to live in that. Okay. You ready for the next one?
I am, and I hope we can. You know what I was thinking, Tammy? Would it be okay if we answered some of the shorter ones? We could probably get through a couple of shorter ones faster, but I
Well,
don't want to leave that.
I already answered can you give us some more information on the couples therapy? I put the link in the chat.
Okay, so you're right.
And
This is the last. Okay, go
yeah,
ahead.
this is the last one, because the other one is neglected them, and I don't know what that's
Got
tagged
it.
to. So I'm the betrayed spouse. I've been in counseling for 2 years. For some time, we had a sort of in-house separation. Plus, he travels for work. He's not doing recovery. He won't attend these meetings. We've been separated for 3 weeks. This new type of separation began with a temporary
Wow.
restraining order. I dismissed it, but don't want him back in our home. My home is more peaceful without him. He's uh, removed me
Ooh,
from one joint savings account. Our church agrees we need
ooh.
separation for safety and well-being for all. Close friends are advising me it's time to legally separate to protect myself and kids. I've been a full-time mom for 23 years because he wanted me to stay home. Now I'm 50, he's 58. We have teens still at home. The other kids are adults. Part of me wants to have a meeting to discuss things, but my friends say to let go of his recovery. It's time to legally move away from him and forward with a legal separation. He refuses to return to his CSAT. There's no one directing him. I'm frustrated. There seems to be nothing else to do with our coupleship. I'll keep
I
doing
think
my
I can
recovery
answer
work.
this fairly quickly, which
Yeah.
is all the information you need is there.
Yeah.
All the info, there's nothing that you don't already know. It's just you're asking us for the answer. Everyone says don't be together. There's a restraining order. He's draining money and knocking you off your bank accounts. Everyone in your church says be separated. You don't feel safe with your relationship as it was with your kids around. Um, I don't. I can't give you more information. I don't know your relationship, but boy, that is enough information. And a legal separation, what are you going to do when all the money disappears? How are you going to take care of your kids? Or I'm not saying that this is someone who might want to deprive their children, but some people get very angry and they want to tell you how angry they are. And so they're not going to let you have access to the money. So I wouldn't necessarily bring up lawyers except for that. When you said he's removed me from a joint savings account, that means he took a step toward eliminating your equality and putting you at risk. By the way, there's violence here, obviously, because you wouldn't get restraining orders and churches wouldn't be. So with all due respect, I don't think anything you could say or do is going to make the situation different for your partner. This person is deeply troubled. They're impulsive, they're aggressive, they're addicted. These are the kind of issues people come to treatment for, but this isn't someone who's even willing to. Someone's got to meet you halfway. And so I don't think there's anything you could say in some kind of meeting that you haven't already said or that isn't already obvious. Now I think you need to begin to grieve what you already know you have to do. And if you need my permission to do it, if not for you, protect your children from this kind of tension and anger and upset and violence. It's your church said we need to separate for the safety and well-being of all. Protect myself and my kids. And as I say to a lot of partners, if you can't do this for you right now, do it for your children, whether it's a separation or whatever, but we're saying you go to treatment or else. It isn't just about you, and kids see everything. They know everything. We just had a book come out, actually, Tammy, in our field about children of sex addicts. And it's a real gift because there's not a lot out there. And one of the things the author said to me, we did a podcast recently, and lots of folks like the podcast. So actually, Tammy, that would be great if you noted in there. I think we had 8,000 downloads this week, just to say it.
Yep. It's that one's live, so I will put it in.
But right. So now I
The
lost my
ripple
thread.
effects of adult children of sex addicts with Dr. Ken Adams.
Right. So what he's done a lot of research and looked into, one of the questions he's done a lot of research about is how early did you realize that there was something meaningful going on? It probably had to do with your parents' intimacy, or it didn't even have to be sex. How early did you realize there was some kind of problem? Tammy, do you know the answer to that Dr. Adams told me? Just
I bet
quick,
under age 10, but you tell me.
the average age is 7.
7. Oh,
That
wow.
kids knew something was wrong, and it had to do with intimacy and relationship. They felt it, they knew it. By the time they're a little bit older, like approaching puberty, they actually almost always know exactly what it is. So
Wow.
you're fooling yourself if you think that you're fooling your kids, but you don't tell them, you're right, I was doing this. Please don't do that. You can acknowledge that you're struggling, some issues are going on. Please don't any of you tell your kids about your sex life. But I do think this is a good book for those of you who have children to read, about how they're being affected, how they may be affected. And this is, I think what Dr. Adams does, he took the voices from their mouths. He confabulated their stories. So you can see the stories of where kids or adult children are coming from. And I think it's very valuable for those of you who are parents. Tammy, it's dinner time
It is. Yes.
for my
The
dog.
only thing I wanted to add was your home is more peaceful and I don't want him back. So like, you put it in there. So what do you need to make sure that that happens? So,
What I
okay.
hear and feel here is guilt and responsibility for not being able to make it better. And you can't do that by yourself. So have a
Okay.
good, see you soon, Tammy.
I'll see you tomorrow.
All
Bye.
right.
Thanks,
Hope this was
everybody.
helpful, guys. Bye for now.